Good to see everybody tonight. Can you hear me okay? So we have some Dharma friends here at the retreat center where I'm at. I'm up in the caretaker apartment, and there are a few folks in our Dharma hall. You see them. And spending a couple of weeks out here practicing with some community members. Let's settle in for our meditation time. Listen to our body, make the adjustments that will be helpful. Cultivating that stable, relatively upright, relatively relaxed bodily posture. And we do this with a confidence that whatever it is our heart truly seeks, freedom, or however you might articulate that for yourself. It's very clear from what the Buddha teaches, but also from our own experience, that whatever it is we seek, it's here and now. And of course, I know it often doesn't look that way, right? Because we're just feeling our ordinary body with its ordinary ways of holding tension, and our ordinary tired mind or restless mind or whatever it might be like. But the Buddha was very clear that freedom, the deepest freedom, the deepest wisdom and compassion can only arise here and now. In this fathom-length body, as the Buddha says. Because the mind, the heart is right here, knowing the body that's sitting, that's breathing. So everything that needs to be open to, everything that needs to be understood clearly, deeply, immediately, is all here already. We don't need a different moment, a different body, a different teaching. So in the sense, the present moment, the reality of the way it is, moment by moment, is our one and only teacher. And this subjective space of our mind or of our heart, the subjective space of present moment experiences coming and going, it's really not fixed or defined. It's quite open and capable of expressing hellish states and beautiful states. So much of what we're learning is the nimbleness, the freedom that's just embedded in the space of the present moment, the space of the heart, here, now. And we see that in our meditation, going from moments that are very difficult to moments that are very peaceful. But it's helpful, like as we're learning how to be interested in the present moment, the activity of the body and the mind being known, being felt, it's useful, maybe essential to understand that it's a creative process. So we can create hell realms and beautiful realms. And with humility, we realize we don't really know how to do it. So instead of trying to make a nice experience for ourselves or trying to get rid of a bad experience like pain in the body, the Buddha's recommendation is to emphasize being observant of the space of the present moment and how it is that hellish states arise for us, and how it is that release and peace and even at times bliss arises lawfully, not to try to do it, but just to be a good student, observing, sensing the lawfulness of all of the difficult states and all of the beautiful states. And one last thing before we move into silence, even this willingness to be open and humble and observant of what comes and goes in the body and mind will eventually be experienced as a beautiful state. Trusting nature, the nature of the body and the mind to be nature, is a real gift, a generous and wise way to be relating to this life. So we do our best to keep this practice in mind, to begin again and again, and never give up. So we'll continue in silence now. for these last few minutes, remembering that we're interested in a refuge, a way of relating, a way of being here now that is onward leading to more freedom, tenderness, more skillfulness. So what can we learn both about what is the way, but also, sometimes more importantly, learning about what is not the way? Like what's the way towards more tension, more contraction? Let's just see what can be realized in the next minute or two. Simply by opening and observing the heart, the citta, the space of the present moment, here and now. And when you're ready, open the eyes. Notice what it's like to be moving the body a little. It's nice to take a moment, make sure you have a sense of the community that's gathered here tonight so that we, don't perpetuate, ideas of being alone or isolated. It's as if we're in the room together. And I really appreciate people showing up for the Tuesday night group. For one, it allows me to teach without having a mask on. I definitely appreciate that. A lot of you know that I have a medical condition where the doctors take away my immune system for a couple years to treat this autoimmune disorder that I used to be dealing with. So this is how they manage that. So it's really nice to not have a mask on and to be able to teach. And I thought tonight I'd talk a little bit about refuge. I've been following, as a lot of you know, this wonderful collection of teachings from Ajahn Chah. It's called the Collected Teachings of Ajahn Chah, a very famous Thai monk teacher who died in the 1990s. And I just put some resources there, some articles, including a link to get that book. It's freely available online. And also you can listen to Ajahn Amaro reading the chapters. He's one of Ajahn Chah's students, who's also now the abbot of a big monastery in England, Ajahn Amaro. And sometimes, when we talk about refuge, we, because some of us get attracted to Buddhism because it doesn't sound like the religion we were brought up in. We're not being asked to believe in something or something like that. And then when you talk about refuge, it can sort of raise that thought like, oh no, Mark or somebody's gonna tell me what I should believe in, or this is the dogma. But as you, I hope, understand, the Buddhist teachings are very earthy and pragmatic. And the truth is, whether we acknowledge it or not, we already have refuges. Green tea is one of my refuges when I'm feeling a little down. I make myself a cup of really good Japanese sencha, and I would not. It would be an adjustment not having green tea around. I was just thinking I better order some more. I'm almost out. And we have other routines that we don't realize what a refuge it is until something interrupts the routine, or certain foods, or certain people we do want to be around or don't want to be around. And even more sacred, are certain ideas that we hold dear. And presuming that it's okay to, take this idea personally or attach or even be fixated on it, because it's like comforting that this idea that the world is this way, or these people are bad in this way, or these people are good in this way, or this is the way that this thing should be done. So the question isn't like, do we need a refuge or not? The real question is like, what are my refuges? And are they doing their job? Like, are they dependable? And are they allowing my heart, body, and mind to fully release? This is from the Dalai Lama. Once we take ourselves and the quality of our life seriously and acknowledge the difficulties we may be experiencing, the next step is to have confidence that, 1, it is possible to overcome them, and 2, there's a way to accomplish this, and 3, we are capable of achieving it. Taking refuge is not a passive act of placing ourselves in the hands of a higher power that will do everything for us, as the English word refuge might imply. It is an active process of putting a safe, reliable, and positive direction in our life. Yeah, it's kind of like our guiding light that in some moments we're very clear, conscious of, and in other moments is sort of working behind the scenes as we do everything we do in life. And like I said, we have those guiding lights. They're just, when we illuminate and are honest about them, like if only I get this amount saved up for retirement, then I'll be safe, and that's our refuge. But we wouldn't say that out loud to anybody. But in terms of how we operate, or, whatever the fixation our mind has that sort of, when this happens, we'll be safer or we'll be safe. There's a famous discourse called the Heartwood Sutta in the Middle Length Discourses, a very important collection of the Buddha's discourses called the Majjhima Nikaya, or the Middle Length Discourses. And in that Heartwood Sutta, there's this basic simile of somebody in need of something, going in search of something, but coming up short-handed. I'll just read a little bit from this discourse. In the same way, practitioners, there is a case where a certain person from a good family, out of conviction, goes forth from the home life into homelessness. So they become a monastic, thinking, I'm beset by birth, by aging and death, by sorrows, lamentations, pains, distresses, and despairs, beset by stress, overcome with stress. Perhaps the end of this entire mass of stress might be discerned. Having thus gone forth, one encounters gain, offerings, and fame, right? So people see that person as being like special. Oh, look at this person's become a Buddhist nun, a Buddhist monk. You know, they have a shaved head. They follow the rules of their monastic order. They're so impressive in that way, you know, and people want to give gifts, and we can get intoxicated by that sort of level, right? So it's like in the simile of the heartwood, it's like you go in search of heartwood, a big tree with solid heartwood, and you end up coming back with twigs and leaves. You know, it's not really what you wanted, but you got intoxicated with just people being impressed by you and the power that comes from, yeah, just being accepted, being acknowledged, being seen as acceptable. And that's like one of those false refuges. I mean, definitely when we were teenagers, and probably all of us still today, that is an undercurrent in our motivations, like to be liked, right? We want to be liked. We want to be, you know, treated as somebody who's worthy of respect, or at least worthy of acknowledgement. We don't want to be ignored most of the time. And then he goes on, right? Because in this case, this is the sort of end of the discourse where the person isn't getting intoxicated with these lesser refuges. He's not gratified with that gain, those offerings, that fame. One's resolve is not fulfilled. One is not intoxicated, not heedless about it, and does not fall into heedlessness. Being heedful, one achieves consummation in virtue. So this is sort of the next level, like, okay, I'm accepted, I'm liked, I'm respected, but I'm going to go a little deeper, and I'm going to really purify my action in the world so that I'm not causing harm. I'm going to become really sensitive and attentive to how I live, and harmonize in ways, live my life in ways that isn't taking advantage of other people, in a way that is generous and kind, right? So this is sila, moral conduct, this deep valuing of non-harming, understanding how much suffering there is, this deep value, like I do not want to contribute to more suffering. It affects everything from the kind of clothes we buy, the kind of food we eat, the kind of number of resources we need to maintain our well-being, you know, how frugal we are, what we do with our extra resources. And the same pattern, you know, they're gratified with that virtue, that beautiful sila, but their resolve is not fulfilled. Because of that development of virtue, one does not exalt in oneself or disparage others, right? Because that's what we might do, is like, yeah, I'm really good, but these other people are naughty and they're misbehaving and they're lesser beings because of that. And it doesn't mean we're oblivious to who's excuse me, who's acting skillfully or not. We just don't turn it into a conceit, right? It's just seen clearly, but not used to divide or to separate. One is not intoxicated with that development of virtue, not heedless about it, does not fall into heedlessness. So being heedful, one achieves consummation in concentration, right? So first you know how to fit in and be accepted, you know, and then you realize that's not really what life is about, right? And you think, well, I'm going to become a really good person and live with a lot of integrity. And as nice as that is, as good as that is, it's also limited. It's like, you know, I'm still susceptible to stress and suffering. So then you develop your mind, right? Concentration is sort of a bad translation of samadhi. It's really knowing how the mind can become beautiful, stable, clear, soft, wieldy, meaning it can do what needs to be done, but in a whole, undivided way. So when we wash the dishes, it's not begrudgingly. We're just the heart, mind, body, all integrated, doing the dishes. And we're talking to a friend, 100% there. We're not like wanting to check our phone or, whatever. It's just we have moments of samadhi, so we kind of know the difference between when we're really disconnected and when there is that sense of unification, grounded, whole, which is also light, right? So that's the concentration. Because of that consummation of concentration, one does not exalt oneself or disparage others, right? We don't make fun of the restless people or the distracted people around us, right? Just because our mind is more stable, centered, clear, grounded, peaceful. One is not intoxicated with that concentration, not heedless about it, and does not fall into heedlessness. Being heedful, one achieves knowledge and vision. So because of that concentration and not getting intoxicated by it, one has insight, starts to see and understand what the mind hasn't yet seen and understood about life generally, but it's specifically about how it is that suffering arises and how it is that it ceases. And not just subjectively in our own experience, we just see it all around us. When we see happy people, when we see anything, a happy bird, we see it in a conditional sense, like, oh yeah, when the bird has food, when the bird is not injured, then it's like this. And when the bird is threatened, it's in a different state. And our friends and ourselves. And this is what knowledge and vision is pointing to, those words. It's like the mind, the wisdom in the mind can now discern the causes for stress and the causes for release. And no matter what we're doing in life, doing our job, taking out the trash, brushing our teeth, getting ready for bed, what that discerning is always happening. Like, how is the mind relating in ways that might lead to stress, or how is the mind relating in ways that lead to release, peace, tenderness, all the good qualities, right? So it's sort of like that wisdom now. So knowledge and vision is not a small thing. It's really potent, but it's not the heartwood in the simile. So the same thing's going to happen, right? One's gratified, so they're not deluded. They know that they have vision and knowledge. They know that the mind now has this capacity to discern what's skillful and unskillful, but they don't take it personally, and put a billboard, hey, I know what's going on around here. Let me tell you. They're gratified with that knowledge and vision, but one's resolve is not fulfilled. Because of that knowledge and vision, one does not exalt themselves or disparage others. One is not intoxicated with the knowledge and vision, not heedless about it, does not fall into heedlessness. Being heedful, one achieves a non-occasional liberation. That's a funny translation. And it is impossible, practitioners. There is no opportunity for that practitioner to fall from that non-occasional release. That means that the continued development of that knowledge and vision leads to, it's like it changes the nature, the ongoing nature, or ongoing unfolding of our mind, our heart. Like there's no going back. It's sort of, when you see something, if you took a balloon and you floated all the way around the earth, it didn't matter if every other person thought the world was flat. You started one place, you kept going east, and you ended up at the same place. You would have that conviction, no, the world is a sphere. It's not a flat plate. I've seen it with my, we say, with my own eyes. And it's the same thing when the heart realizes non-grasping, realizes the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion in a moment. Depending on how clear that moment is, that changes the mind. And that's the only way really to evaluate the deepening of wisdom or insight, is like, how has the life been changed? How has the way that this life is being lived changed? That's the point, right? It's not like a medal you get that we hang. Oh, okay, I had a deep insight. The medal, or the real fruit of the insight, is having been changed, right? So that the very well greased tendencies to be greedy or to be fearful or to be aversive or to want to be distracted and in denial, they're just not as intoxicating, right? Wisdom sees, oh yeah, there's something there, but I'm not biting. And it begins to see a kind of a different allegiance to a peace, the peace of non-attachment, or the peace of non-clinging, the peace of equanimity, like that balance that, yeah, good things come. I like good things. Difficult experiences come. I don't like difficult experiences, but they come, and that's okay. And if there's something I can do when difficult experiences come, I'll do it. But if there's nothing in my power to do or appropriate to do, then I know how to be with difficult experience. So it's not a passivity, and it's not a giving up. It's just understanding something about the nature of the mind itself, the nature of experience itself, that is liberating the mind from its dependence on sense experience being particular ways, like pleasant and not unpleasant, right? Just to be direct about it. Because right now, that's, like I said at the beginning of the talk, that's primarily our refuge, is that, the thing I'm really banking on is to be able to make choices where I'm going to get more pleasant and less unpleasant. And I'm banking on that. That's my refuge, is that I'm doing what I can to set in motion pleasantness. And some of us are more short-term minded about it, and I just want to be pleasant now, and I don't care about the long-term consequences. And others of us have a very long-term perspective, like, I'm willing to suffer for a long time as long as I have a beautiful future that I'm shaping for myself. But both are setups. Even, the steady person who's like kind of building, because as nice as it is, and it's not like we want to lose that practical skill at taking care of the body, eating good food, taking care of our health, taking care of our relationships, taking care of our communities we're involved with in the whole world, and even the ecosystem of our planet, right? It makes a lot of sense to not ignore, not neglect those things. But they're ultimately not dependable, none of them. So where is our refuge? So the Heartwood Sutta, the Buddha ends with a phrase, something like, I think this is near the end, thus the purpose of the spiritual life is not about acquiring benefits, honor, or fame, nor in gaining virtue, as nice as it is to be virtuous, nor in gaining states of concentration, as deeply healing as states of concentration can be, nor insight and the eye of knowledge. The unshakable deliverance of the heart, the sure heart's release, this and this alone is the object of the holy life, the spiritual life, its essence and its true goal. So that's kind of an interesting, like, how do we, in a very real way, each of us in our lives, how do we hold that, use that in a way that's helpful for us? The unshakable release of the heart sure release. Because what those words are pointing to is a release, this subjective space of Mark, me, I, me, mine, right here, that I'm sensing right now, unburdened with weight, unburdened with constriction, unburdened with fear, unburdened with longing, unburdened, unburdened, right? Released. I like the word released because it has sort of a visceral sense. And we want to cultivate a sense of that possibility of release. Unconditional, not release when you're getting a really good massage by somebody who really knows what they're doing and the room is so sweet and so tranquil and just the right music in the background and temperature is just right and or whatever. But a release that isn't disturbed when conditions are unpleasant and difficult. And it's good to, this is like a proper use of imagination around refuge and aspiration. Like, can you, because, imagination, as you may know, is a really powerful force in the mind. So let's put it to work. Can we imagine being me, being you? Can we imagine being who we are with a heart, with this heart's full release, no matter the conditions? Moving through our life, think about the intense places, think about the really exciting places, think about the really difficult, think about the really boring places in my life, our lives. And there'd be something, the peace, which is quite full, not a cold, icy, like I don't care peace, but like a really embodied, full presence, but undisturbed as we navigate the boring, the pleasant, the unpleasant, the intense, the whatever that human beings navigate in our lives. A famous, not a famous, but a well-known translator and one of the early Europeans who went to some of the Theravada Buddhist countries to practice when they were young. His monastic name was Nyanaponika Thera. He's passed away now, but I think maybe in the 30s he went to Sri Lanka and from, I believe England, but I'm not 100% sure. It might have been Germany. And spent, the rest of his adult life there, practicing and translating. And we're those of us here in the West these days really benefit from those early Europeans who went and did so much of the translation into English of the Buddhist teachings. And he asked these questions that I thought would be good for us just to contemplate together. Is this world of ours really such a place of danger and misery that there is need for taking refuge? Like, do we need a refuge better than the refuges we already have? My green tea, the nice home that I sort of put together for myself with my partner, my cat, my practice even, just like the rituals that we have that make us feel safe, knowing the people we live around or however, whatever it is. Do we need, are the refuges that we have going to be sufficient when things happen? Because one of the givens in life is anything can happen anytime, right? All you have to do is read the news, and there's always one or two articles about something happening that was out of the box to someone. And then the next question is, well, I'll just mention a few more things about do we really need a refuge? And just to bring to mind, even if we have a really privileged existence, and I'm hoping some of us do, because there's nothing to be embarrassed about having a privileged existence. It's really what we do with it that matters. But let's say we're comfortable in all ways, healthy, good friends, in the bloom of youth. And but are all of those things a refuge when we know that there's tremendous suffering and injustice in the world, right? So what's a refuge that even addresses this sort of paradox that even in those moments when we do feel safe and comfortable, somewhere, whether we acknowledge it or not, we are aware that this is not always so, or definitely not so for so many, let alone all the other creatures on the planet that are in really difficult states, like in the industrial farming world, right? There's just a lot of suffering. So that affects how we are, like in terms of being safe in this world. And we just want to be honest about it, because otherwise, whether we know it or not, we're expending a lot of energy to be in denial of the truth of suffering, even when we're doing quite well. And it doesn't mean that the alternative is to obsess about the suffering in the world. That can just be another way of self-hatred and self-violence, to kind of, in a way, beating ourselves up because other people are suffering and the unfairness of it all. That doesn't help those people. So I'm saying that just to kind of support, oh, maybe we do need a refuge that's a little bit wiser and more powerful than hoping for a relatively comfortable existence. Because, I have that impulse, I talk about it all the time, about just wanting to go somewhere safe and nice, in the woods, or preferably close to Lake Superior with a view. It's just like my safe spot where no one will bother me, and I won't have duties and responsibilities, and there won't be bugs, and the place won't need a new roof, or won't have a mold problem, and on and on. So if the answer is, yeah, maybe I do need a refuge, then the next question that Nyanaponika Thera asks is, well, does such a refuge exist? Like, what do you know? Do you have any clues? And one clue we have for sure is that we've learned what refuges don't work. Like, romantic love, I consider myself in a really good long-term committed relationship with my partner, Wynn Fricke. And but it's not a refuge. It's a teacher for sure, like a really powerful teacher. And there's a lot of worldly gratification in having a good friend and sharing a lot of your life with another person that you can harmonize with relatively well, similar values. I mean, there's so much positive to say about good friends, whether they're, romantic or intimate partners or just good friends or family. But it's not a refuge. You can't count on it, right? To make you safe. And if anything, it breaks your heart open, right? Because you can't protect the people you love, and they can't control and protect you. I mean, that doesn't mean we can't do anything, but it just means that in the end, we live in a world that is where there's vulnerability, and the ungovernable nature of it is just the bottom line. The exposure and the insecurity is the bottom line. So does such a refuge exist? I think it's okay to be like, I don't know, I'm interested. And then he asks, what is its nature? Or maybe we could change that to, what might its nature be? The nature of a refuge that would really lead to the deepest safety. And the Buddha, is really clear that that refuge does exist and it's here and now. So as whenever our spiritual activity is about getting something later, we're kind of missing the point. Like if we're interested in a release, a freedom, a peace, a goodness or tenderness, later we have to look for it, we have to be interested, we have to observe here and now. And in that way, the path, it has this integrity where the means are related to the ends. He says, he defines refuge, Nyanapanikatera, a conscious act of will, right? So we're not being passive. We can't, it's like the Buddha was so clear, this is not about somebody saving us. One teacher said, I love this, the Buddha's already done his work. Now it's our turn, right? The Buddhists, they can't save us. They can point the way, they can, share the roadmap that they, as they understand it, like how their opening, their awakening, their deepening happened, but they can't do the work for us. So it's a conscious act of will, like we have to be willing, like the Dalai Lama said, he said, people generally are content with their spiritual life and discontent with what they have. And he said, people should turn that around and be discontent with their spiritual lives and content with what they have, right? Because the idea is like spiritual life isn't just, there's part of spiritual life that's just about soothing the nervous system, just like, I need to relax, I need to settle down, I need something to help me get through my days, right? But just getting through our days doesn't really resolve the deeper issues of our human existence. So besides the soothing, we want this sort of conscious act of will. We want to take steps. Like if I'm interested in being peaceful, then I'm going to practice being peaceful with conditions now. If I'm interested in being kind, I'm going to be kind with myself and the conditions now. If I'm interested in being free of being tight, I'm going to be free with the way it is now. I'm going to practice. So a conscious act of will, and then he says, directed towards liberation, however we intuit what liberation is. And it doesn't matter, you just have to begin. Whatever your idea of liberation is, however mundane it starts, it will just keep developing it as you get interested in what real freedom is. Initially, freedom is, I just want to get to Friday and be free of my work for a couple days. I mean, that's a pretty mundane idea of freedom. But if we keep bringing awareness to that and really see the gratification that comes on Friday afternoon when we're done for the week, and then the loomingness of Monday, and starting all over again, it will just dawn on the mind, yeah, it's nice, but it isn't a refuge, A conscious act of will directed towards liberation based on knowledge. So here, knowledge isn't intellectual knowledge, it's experiential knowledge. So our sense of liberation is a living, dynamic thing that's growing and deepening as our experience informs it. What is real freedom? And the last piece here, he says, and inspired by faith. And faith is this power of imagination, of possibility. Like when the Buddha says this amazingly provocative thing, there is an end to suffering. And then you look at our world and we look at our conditioned minds and our habit energies and the fact that we're getting older and all of us are going to die one way or another at some point, which we don't know. and we don't know how, and all that we love, all that is dear to us will be taken from us, right? Because you can't take anything with you. So given that that's all true, that there's an end to suffering, that there is a release. And people like myself who've been practicing for a while with some sincerity have real taste, real experience of that possibility of release, of this human existence as it actually is for me, not being a problem. Even though on that sort of ordinary level, like, oh, I really would like my back not to hurt, and I'd really like this and that, and and this to go away, and tweak this, but all of that sort of normal human liking and disliking more and more is held by this vast wisdom that understands that things are the way that they are. They keep changing in this ungovernable way that is not personal in any way. Personal, it doesn't refer back to me in the way that we have been conditioned to think. And it can't be an intellectual understanding. It has to be realized directly. This is from a student of Ajahn Chah, this Thai forest monk, Ajahn Jayasaro, a British person. He's been a monk now for many decades. And he wrote a wonderful article called Faith in the Quest. Faith clarifies the goal, focuses our efforts, and fills us with energy. Ultimately, it is wisdom rather than faith that moves mountains. But it is faith that impels us to move them in the first place, right? To be as bold, like I'm just an ordinary human being, who grew up in North Minneapolis, having been conditioned by 1960s television, with parents who grew up in the way they grew up on farms in Montana and North Dakota, and that kind of conditioning gets embedded, in my genes from my ancestors from Poland and Eastern Europe and Germany, and then to be bold enough to imagine being me, this living thing here, free of suffering, unconstricted, or as in Tibetan Buddhism, they sometimes say unstoppable compassionate action, because there's no friction, there's nothing, no conceit. Like to imagine that as a possibility, to hold that, where we can be all in life, really show up unhindered, unafraid, being real, without the weightfulness of self-consciousness or the weightfulness of fear or the weightfulness of longing. And the question is really pragmatic, like, what is the harm of having that aspiration, like working it, bringing it up, seeing if there is some faith? And initially it's borrowed faith, like from a talk like this and from the teachings of the Buddha, or from other interactions you've had maybe with people, that has inspired this possibility. It's actually a nice way to relate to those people in our lives that have some qualities you admire, like oh, I aspire to being as generous as you. I aspire to having as much virtue, as much sila, that integrity around harming as you do. I really aspire to having the kind of settled, concentrated mind that you seem to have. Because you're basically demonstrating that it's possible for a human being to develop these really beautiful qualities all the way to this full release. Joseph Goldstein sometimes says, people are afraid of awakening or enlightenment, like, oh, I don't know if it's worth it. It's just like, I'll have to give up so much. I kind of like my attachments. we have that I would call it wrong understanding. We just haven't looked, because really awakening or liberation or enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, release, the unshakable release of the heart, all that we're letting go of is suffering. Like anything that is heavy and weightful and constricted, that is what is released. Are we interested in that? Are we interested in letting go of the grip of hate and resentment? Are we interested in letting go of the burning of desire? The cloud of delusion, of us not being connected, not knowing what's up and down? I don't think so. I think we might be interested in that. This is from Ajahn Amaro, another student of Ajahn Chah, another British teacher, Buddhist monk. The Buddha, which is a refuge, is the awakened nature of your own mind, your own heart, that quality of knowing your own nature, which is unborn, undying, invulnerable, unaffected by any of the experiences that we discern. So taking refuge in Buddha means being that knowing, letting go of our identification with love and hate, praise and criticism, gain and loss, happiness and unhappiness, letting go of our identification with sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought, feeling. And see, this can be misunderstood because we think letting go of that means being distant. But actually, letting go of the attachment, the identification, brings us right into the middle. As a famous Zen teacher, Dogen, from the 13th century said, being intimate with all things. So I'll leave it here so we have time for discussion. It'd be nice to hear from you. Your own, over time, your own sense of refuge in your life, how that has evolved over time, what's worked, kinds of doubts that have come up for you, questions that come from the talk. People online, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself. If you know how to raise your digital hand, you can just do that. People in the hall, you can just move up to the computer. Matthew will probably show you how to unmute the computer so that I can hear you. Yeah, what comes to mind? Yeah, go ahead, Irene.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Mark. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. Yeah, I would say that phrase when you were talking about your partner Wynn, and like it's true, like we can't protect or control anybody. And it's just like I see it, even though I didn't have children of my own, all my siblings did, and my youngest brother's son, my nephew, he's 18. He was just really in a very, very terrible car accident about a week ago. And he's about 15 years younger than me, my brother is. So he's just 41. And I just think, I'm like, wow, I can't imagine being in his shoes right now as a parent, and the confusion that he must be experiencing. And so that's on my mind. And then, I've just been grappling a lot with the work that I do in the world. And then, I see it in myself too, right? Like, while my refuges have changed over the years, I definitely still have some refuge. I have a lot of refuges that are somewhat unwholesome, not onward leading. And then, mostly, largely the people that I work with in the world. Yeah, I just see how we're battered around so much by our habitual patterns. And I think of the phrase of like, I think you have talked that the Buddha, the reason why the Buddha decided to teach is because maybe a few people would understand, and it broke his heart to see the world the way it was. And yeah, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart when I do harm to my own self. And it breaks my heart when I see bear witness. And it's hard to bear witness and not interfere and try to fix and control and protect. It's really hard.
Yeah. And the key is not to hate ourselves, like you're suggesting, for the habits of the mind to seek safety in ways that don't ultimately lead to safety. All our little addictive patterns, some are more toxic than others, but even the ones that are not so toxic, we just we do want to see the limitations of them, as hard as that is. And it does break our heart. And it's an edgy, spiritual life is edgy because it can slip into nihilism and depressive kind of attitudes, like, what the heck, nothing matters, but it's like that, it brings integrity to where the mind looks for refuge. Because otherwise the mind will go from one relatively superficial refuge to a different, when that fails, it will go to another relatively superficial refuge. And so the mind, wisdom has to generalize, like, no, this whole category of refuges, like food, like entertainment, like even wholesome relationships or health in the body, all of that, I'm not saying no to any of that, talking to herself, honey, you can do that, but it's not really addressing this deep aspiration for release, for safety that's unconditional, right? That doesn't come and go, that doesn't depend on anything. That only comes from understanding. And a lot of our momentum initially is knowing what doesn't work, not really having good clarity about what the Buddha is pointing to. Like, what is that insight? We have words, like you can become a Buddhist scholar and to say, oh yeah, it's all about non-attachment, or it's realizing the heart that's not clinging. That's a good answer. Like, oh, what is that release? Oh, all I have to do is realize the heart that doesn't cling to anything, isn't identified or attached. But the real is to get interested, like, in the attachment. Like when we catch ourselves, like you said, Irene, doing those things, then the first step is not to be attached to acting out in this unskillful way. So, we're on our third episode of something, we're binge watching something, we had a hard day, we had this sense, oh, I deserve some escape, from my life. And one felt good. And then two, there was a little desperation at the end of the first episode, and we just slipped right into the second episode. And now there's a yucky feeling in the background for having watched two episodes when we're really tired and we got to get up early. But we don't want to feel that, so we're going to watch a third episode so we don't feel the mistake we've made, right? And so what wisdom and awareness does is just like it has this really deep, resonant tenderness, like, oh, I get it. I get what's going on here, because we're just talking about these patterns. We're not being judgmental. We're not being the scolding parent. Wisdom and awareness understands, right? Oh, you can do that. You can do the third episode, and if there's a fourth, you can watch that too. But I'm here too, and I understand cause and effect. And you can drown me out, but I'm going to seep in this understanding that we live in a lawful universe. And running from a yucky feeling is yucky. So you have your yucky feeling, and then you have the yuckiness of running from your yucky feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And eventually the truth changes the habits of the mind. But it's a messy process that needs a lot of that tenderness, a lot of that wisdom, compassion to hang in there. Because otherwise it just seems like I'm just going to write it out take advantage of my habits of distraction and hope for the best. And we're kind of fortunate when life delivers enough blows that we see that that's not really going to work for me. I'm going to go another way. I'm going to start paying attention and see where that leads. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Irene?
Mark, can I pop in here?
Yeah. Are you done, Irene?
I am. Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Irene. Go ahead, Kevin.
So I'm hoping you can help me understand something. This week I had for a week I've had these exchanges with my brothers who are very dear to me, and we have very different ideas about some current event things, particularly relief efforts in North Carolina, where I spent a lot of time. And while I was seeing this turmoil amongst us, I realized that something you said about my refuges, I was thinking about my refuge for me, and I don't get caught up in their anger, is doing my practice in the morning, doing a sit, coming to quiet, and it just helps me not get drawn into that like they are. And so I don't know that that's sufficient when you were asking that question, but I feel like it's necessary for me at this point in my life. If I'm not doing that, it's much more likely I get caught up in that judging and anger, and fighting rather than understanding. And for me, that's worth so much. But I really give my practice a lot of credit for any success I have or any opportunity to have that presence that really matters to me.
Yeah, no, that's a great testimonial to a steady practice, because that's exactly right, right? Let's say we sit every morning like Kevin, or often, and what are we doing? Well, regardless of your particular technique, if you're doing some kind of Buddhist awareness practice, you're cultivating present moment awareness with the conditions that are there for you. And in that kind of working ground of being present with the conditions that are there for you, you're learning about ways to be present that allows the heart to be peaceful and not agitated. Because when you're relating to your experience in a way that leads to agitation, because we have relatively simple environment when we're doing our daily sit, we'll notice cause and effect, right? So we're learning the basics in our daily sit about how to relate to reality, how to relate to the present moment in a way that doesn't throw fuel into the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion, right? It's really more about what we're learning not to do, not what we do, right? So the calmness that we experience that you talked about, Kevin, is because for that training, you've learned not to throw fire or throw fuel into the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. And that learning gets generalized. It carries over into the day. Now, some of that learning is just your heart knows how to be calm. That we'd call more the learning about samadhi. You know how to be even and calm and steady. And some of it is wisdom. And wisdom is going to be ultimately more valuable than the samadhi, but samadhi for sure is good. So like, for example, wisdom is much more resilient. Like if you don't get to sit for a while and you don't really touch into those peaceful places that you can access when you're sitting, do you lose your ability to talk to your brothers? Because if you do, then that is more about the samadhi that you're touching into and its reverberation through the day. But wisdom is like this sort of more nimble, it works in almost any situation. It's like, yeah, that's just a thought being known, like my brothers don't know what they're talking about or something like that. Oh, that's just a thought. Or maybe they've triggered some old ancient emotion from when you were boys together growing up, where they dominated you or you dominated them or whatever it was. Oh, that's just that feeling being felt, right? There's a sense of being able to deconstruct any sticky situation into the elemental pieces of what's there actually being felt and known, and not being confused by it, not taking the bait. So that's more the wisdom. And generally, you know, we can't, they're integrated, the samadhi effects and the power of wisdom to kind of protect us during the day. Yeah, any other thoughts, Kevin?
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Looks like we should probably wrap it up here. Thanks for the comments, Irene and Kevin, and thanks everyone for showing up. Nice to see you here. A couple of announcements. There's a day long on October 26th. I'll be leading that both on Zoom and in person. Half day that I'll be teaching with Gabe Keller Flores on November 2nd, I think in the afternoon, both online and in person. The year-end retreat registration is now open, the 26th of December in the evening until the 31st of December, 12 noon. Lots of other programs coming up, including several here at the retreat center in the next couple months, so you can check the calendar for all of our programs, both at the retreat center and at the city center and on Zoom. Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to say good night. So good to see you all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.